Now, who said this? We will be together in the fight against imperialism. Before he got onto the train. Yes, that was Kim Jong Un as he pledged support for President Putin and the war against the West during this visit to the Vostochny Cosmodrome in southeastern Russia.
In other words, a space centre. Following their bilateral talks, President Putin said there were possibilities for military cooperation between Russia and North Korea, opening the door to a possible arms deal. But no details on that. What they have talked about is a deal possibly on satellite technology, which may be why they're at the Space Centre or Cosmodrome. Let's get the thoughts now. Bob Seeley, MP member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Bob, thanks for your time. It's interesting that Putin sort of wanted to talk about the offer of satellites, and they were at this satellite centre because, of course, I think the last two launches of North Korean spy satellites have actually failed.
I understand. So, yes, look, both these people want some fairly nefarious things off each other. Putin, frankly, needs a lot of shells, a lot of weaponry. And the one thing that you can reliably depend on with communist states who love to threaten violence against others and love to talk in militaristic terms is that they've got a lot of kit. And I suspect Kim has an awful lot of Soviet-era kit. And frankly, Putin needs some of that stuff. And even if the tanks are very old, they're not being used generally in the Ukraine war in tank-on-tank battles, but more generally as a form of mobile artillery. So these older tanks still have value. And Kim is probably sitting on millions of 152 artillery shells. So all this stuff Putin needs. And if Putin can offer something back, he's more likely to get lots of kit to enable the Russians to fight their intense artillery battles in southern and eastern Ukraine.
Yeah, but could it literally blow up in Putin's face? We're told that, as you say, a lot of it is Soviet era, perhaps not that well looked after, and such armament does become unstable after a while.
Yeah, very good point, and it absolutely does. I suspect Putin's attitude is it's not going to blow up in his face, so he's not too bothered. And if he can get millions of shells, even if they've got a failure rate of 1 in 5, it's probably better than nothing as long as they're not blowing up the barrels of the weapons themselves.
So, Bob, what do we know about what Russia is willing to do in exchange then? I mean, it's been suggested that North Korea is after technology, sensitive technology from Russia.
Yes, I mean, I think it's a question of how desperate the Russians are and what they're going to have to get and what they're going to have to give to Kim in order to get that Soviet-era military kit and those shells, if that's what they're after. So a part of me thinks that they are... they don't want to damage their relationship too much with China. So I suspect anything that they offer Kim is going to be cleared with the Chinese first. I mean, Russia, sadly, is becoming a China vassal state at the moment, effectively a bigger version of North Korea.
Yeah, I was going to ask you where the Chinese fit into this diplomatic jigsaw now, because, of course, we've got America having brought South Korea and Japan together to try and rebalance things. I mean, is this a reassessment now of East versus West?
Sadly, yes. And we are beginning to have that new sort of global division. It didn't have to happen this way, and it's really sad that it's happening. The biggest gainers thus far out of Russia's war in Ukraine is probably China. They're making good money evading sanctions in a crafty way, not in too much of an obvious way. But also the Russians have become increasingly dependent on China. They become increasingly dependent on China in part because they need to be selling their gas and oil to somebody. And so China's getting a good deal on that energy, much cheaper than the West was paying. Yeah. It's very difficult to reorientate gas supply lines because you've got a lot of physical infrastructure there as well. So the Chinese well, the Russians are becoming much more dependent on China. Doesn't have to be like that. And actually, it's a terrible thing for China, for Russia in the long run, because the only country that has territorial claims, significant territorial claims on the Russian Federation is China in eastern Siberia.
Bob Seeley from the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, thank you very much indeed for bringing us your reaction to that.